hey, let's look at our power switch. So this was the power switch that we made in the last episode, the power switch plate. All fine and good. We like it. However, it turns out that this power switch is sort of susceptible to another robot bumping into it. Maybe an arm extends out or something and turning your power off on your robot. That's no fun. We would like to actually put a guard around this power switch, so you sort of have to reach down into a hole for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the robot base over here, and I'm going to click on robot base. That is just the base. Here's the thing that we want to modify. And so it's part in a part studio. Well, we know that. We wanted to put a finger guard around here. I can actually right click this part in an assembly, and I can come down and do something called edit in context. See it down here? What edit in context will do is it will open this part for editing, what's called in context. And so what it's done is it has included a representation of the rest of the robot here, is showing us this part in context, where it currently resides. If I needed to, I could refer to other geometries. We're not going to do anything terribly complicated here, but I just wanted to let you know that sometimes you can just right click on something, edit in context. Next thing I want to show you is that I can actually modify this part in place. And one of the things I can do is I can start a new sketch and a new extrusion on top of this part. I am going to do a new sketch. And instead of selecting the top plane, I can actually use the face of another extrusion as my plane. So I'm going to click on here, and you can see face of extrude 1. So this face is on top of the first extrusion. And that's how you do a sort of like a multi-layered part. I would like to borrow the outline of this. So I'm going to do something called a project. Project is this little cube up here. Use, project, convert, right? And I can come down and I can click on this plane here, and it just copied the outline of our part from the other extrusion, okay? What I'd like to do is, what we're going to do is we're going to use another command. So we've got this projected line here, and there's another command over here. See this fellow? It's called offset. And what this will do is it'll allow you to take another line and draw a new line that is offset from it. And you can actually do shapes. So I've clicked here. I'm just going to click all the way around. Okay. And it's forming a new shape at an offset from that original shape. We actually want it to be on the inside. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to click on the arrow. And now it's gone to the inside. It's used this other shape as a reference to create a new shape in there. Okay. If I click on nothing, it will now allow me to edit the actual distance of that offset. We're going to use 2 millimeters. Okay. This is going to allow us to create a little wall around the switch. I want you to go do that now. Go do that right now. All right. So you're coming back, and you can see the sketch here. That is the thing that we are now going to extrude. So how tall does it need to be? Well, we'd like it to be up to the top of the switch, okay? And if I've rotated this thing around, you can see, well, there's the top of the switch right there. And since we're in context, we have that geometry available to us. So I can come down here and I can click on the plane that we're starting on, and I can click on the top of the switch, and you can see that it's 8.56 or 576 millimeters. See that down there? You can see it down here. Right. So what I'd like to do is I think we'll make our new extrusion about 9 millimeters tall, and that should hide the entire switch. Okay. So I am going to scroll out a little bit, and I'm going to click on nothing. And now I'm going to do an extrude. And I'm coming in here, and I would like to select just shape that we made there. Notice that it's now a solid and it's an add, and it's adding itself. So it's going to become a part of this part down here, merge scope. This go build amount down here, that is the part it's going to merge with. Okay, so we're adding to go build amount this face on sketch 2, and the depth we wanted to be 9 millimeters, okay? And there's a preview of it. And if I look at it from the side, you can see that we have hidden the switch inside this thing. And to actually turn this on and off, you actually have to use your finger and sort of, poke down into it. This is a completely rational thing to do with a switch card, okay? So I'm gonna hit the green check mark, and you can see there's the result, okay? Again, it's in context, so you can see these parts. You can see a shadow of the switch in there. Very cool. That's what we wanted. So when I'm done here, I can actually come up here. It's up here in the upper middle, and I can click on Go to Assembly. I'm going to do that, and now you can see it will update. It's updated our assembly, and there we have it. Now we have a switch that you can't accidentally run into and shut it off. All right. So the goal of this was to show you, do this edit in context thing. And we're going to do a lot more of editing in context. This just seemed like a simple way to introduce that idea. We can actually add to another part, or we can have multiple sketches and extrusions in a single part. If I wanted to change this again, by the way, I can right click, do an edit in context. All right. Go do that. And then do a go to assembly. Hopefully you got that to work. Cool. So we're going to try making another switch plate real quick, and I wanted to demonstrate editing in context. We would like to be able to make a new part. We're going to just duplicate this switch plate right up here, but we'd like to be able to use all of the geometry of our assembly. So we're sitting here in the robot base assembly, has instances of parts and instances of other assemblies, which are made up of parts, right? We're going to use that as a reference geometry. The magical control is up here. So we're going to go all the way over here, and we're going to find Create Part Studio in Context. And so this will create a new part studio in the context of this assembly. The assembly appears in the part studio as context graphics that can be used for reference. Well, that's a lot of big words. Let's go figure out what the heck that means. So I'm going to click on that. It's asking me to select either the origin or an explicit mate connector. And for right now, we're just going to use the origin. That's where the origin is going to be. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see it says origin. And then I'm going to hit the green check mark. And when I do that, a new part studio is going to appear down here. Here it comes. See the new part studio one there? So this is a brand new part studio. There's nothing in it. However, when you look at this, you can see that there is a representation of the entire robot base assembly. Why is that useful? Well, we're going to be able to reference all of this geometry in order to create and work with our sketch. So I want to create a sketch. I could select the top plane because it is kind of related to this, or I can actually sketch right on top of another instance. And let's do that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to sketch right on top of this part. You can see that thing that turned purple. That is the face of context 1. So it's a face on an instance in context 1. For reasons we'll get into later, click on Disable Imprinting. We would like to draw another version of this switch. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll figure out where's the center, and I'll put in something called a construction line. So to do that, I'm going to hit a line, and I'm going to turn on construction. That means that this line is intended to be useful while making the CAD drawing, and is not used to do extrusions or anything like that. It's really just part of this drawing and isn't really used for extrusions, but you can reference it in other places, right? Okay. I'm going to turn the line off. I'm turning construction off. And you can see it's just this nice dashed line. That's going to be our center line for our new part. I can, if I would like to, I can take these two holes here and I can actually project them. So construction is off, and I'm going to turn line off here, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to do a project. Okay. And that'll allow me to pick this hole and this hole. Okay. And they're now of the appropriate 4 millimeter dimension. And they're also in the correct place in order to line up with those holes. So I just created the holes. They're the proper distance and spacing and size. So I'm going to turn project off. We had a box that is the cutout for the switch. I'm just going to type in 28.5 because that's how wide it was. And it was 10.6 inches tall. That's all good. And again, since I have that construction line, we can do our symmetry constraint around this line and those two verticals, right? So those are now symmetric there. If you'll also remember, originally we decided on a distance between this hole and this line, but we don't need to do that anymore because we can use the reference to the edge of the U channel. And I can do that using this dimension tool. And I can dimension from here to where that edge of that line is, right? And I can tell it to please make that 2 millimeters, right? So so now we have 2 millimeters there. And you see all of our lines are now fully constrained. So far, I only had to type in the dimension of this box, okay? I can use more geometry over here. So I'm going to put in another construction line and I can go from here straight up. So I would like actually our outside box. Remember we had that big box like this? I'd kind of like that to end on this construction line so this lines up with the center of that right there. And then I can use symmetry of here, right? Between these two lines, and that will cause these to get fixed, right? Want to make sure that the distance between these two is at least 4 millimeters. We'll just go with 4, okay? And then turns out I could also use some help in positioning this bottom line. I want it to be down here somewhere. And it turns out the centers of these lines are about 8 millimeters. So let's make an 8 millimeter distance from here to here, okay? So we'll just go do that real quick. I'm going to use that geometry and that geometry, and we'll put in 8 millimeters. Okay. Notice how few dimensions I actually had to put in. We did put some dimensions up here for the opening for the box and stuff, but for the most part, we just used reference geometry for all of this. Okay. So I'm going to hit the green check mark and we'll just extrude that thing and we'll make it 3 millimeters thick like the other plate. And there it is. All right. And it's all being drawn in the context of that assembly. You can still do all of the normal steps. We can put our 8 millimeter fillets here, 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 and here, and just like we did on the other one, okay? And of course, since I just made a part, I need to rename it. It's a go build a rev switch plate. As always, whenever you make a part, and doesn't matter how insignificant you think the part is, always sign the material and then figure out to make it look good, figure out what color it's going to be. So that's what our printed part's going to look like. All right. I'm not going to bother with the switch guard and stuff, but you can see how I was able to do that. Right. And now what I can do is I can come up here and I can go insert and go to assembly. So what it's going to do is it's going to ask for which parts. So you can see over here, it's asked for items to insert. And it automatically guessed that I wanted this part. And I can hit the green check mark and it's going to take me back to my original assembly that I started in, inserted the part, okay? Now there's no constraints on this part. So you can see I can move it over, right? So, you'd want to add a constraint. Yeah, here, we'll just do that real quick. I'm just going to constrain the bottom of that hole to this hole here, okay? All right. So there you go. That is an inserted and now constrained part. So we have this new part studio down here. This is a switch plates, okay? And it turns out that this is now just another legit part studio. I can open this back up. You see just the part studio there. There is an indication that it was created in a context and that a context exists, because if you go over here to the top, above the features, right? There's the sketch and the extrude and the fillet. If you go up here, you can see, it'll tell you that there are assembly contexts available for this. And it turns out, right now we haven't selected one, but if I click down on this, I can select context 1, or a context, and there comes our context again. Now the context has been saved in this Part Studio. It won't change unless you manually update it. And so why I'm telling you that is if I was to, I'm going to go back down here on the bottom to the robot base. And if I make changes to this, I'm going to make a simple change. I'm just going to add 2 screws. Let's add a screw. Let's add a screw here and here. There's 2 screws. I just added those 2 screws. There they are. Okay. So, and I could add or do whatever to a whole bunch of stuff over here. If I go back to switch plates, you can see that those screws don't exist here, right? And they won't update unless you manually update this context, okay? And the way you do that, one way that you can do that is I can come up here to this menu and I can do an update context. Watch what happens when I do this. Update context, come down here. Look, the screws just appeared. Awesome, all right. Another thing I can do, by the way, is I can rename this context, and I'm going to call this switch plate context. Cool. All right. If I go back to robot base, okay, I'm going to go back to the assembly. There's now a difference in the right-click menus. So remember this part? This part, we did do an edit in context. So it'll just edit it in the context of this assembly again, okay? The difference is that this one was, we created a Part Studio in context. And if I right-click on this, you can see that these menu options are a little bit different. Specifically, where it says edit in context, it now allows me to switch which context I would like to use. I can either use the previous context that we used. Remember, I called it switch plate context. I named that as switch plates Part Studio. Or I could create a new context, but let's just go with this. So if I click on that and I come back in, you can see that it brings me back to the context that I created this thing in. I can turn the context off by clicking on none. I can bring it back, okay? Now, other things I can do is if stuff is in my way, sometimes you bring in a whole assembly and let's say that I really wanted to create a part under here somewhere, right? You can actually turn specific instances of things on and off. Let's take a look at that. So I can do a hide show context instances. And what this is showing me is the assembly, and these are all of the instances. This is the instance list that created this context. So for example, I can turn off the side rails, right? So I can turn these side rails off. Okay, I can turn it back on. Right? I can also reach into the side rail and turn off, let's say I want to get rid of that wheel right there. Well, I can find it. It's one of these. Pretty sure it's, let's go with this one. Is this it? Here's the 3600, so let's turn that off. Oh, whoops, wrong one. Okay. The UI here isn't terribly great, but I can turn that wheel off, and now I can, I can edit under there, right? So I can turn things off as at the assembly level, or I can get all the way down to the individual parts within the assembly, right? So I can turn these guys off, I can turn those off. Now, if you've been scraping around down in there, so let's get it all the way down to this, and I can hit that check mark, and now I can go and work on this thing. When you want to bring your entire context back, you can come up here and you can click on Restore Context View State, and so that's pretty cool. And that basically that turned everything back on. It's basically all that really does. And again, I can go to Assembly, and that will bring me back. What did we just see? We saw ourselves creating a Part Studio in context. Okay. And really all that means is that I'm creating a visual representation of the rest of the assembly and then creating Part Studio referencing those geometries. Okay. We showed how you can update the context with this menu up here. You can remove things if they're in your way. You can hide and show individual assemblies or parts within your context. And then you can actually restore the context view state. And we also showed how to update in case there are changes out there, right? Another thing I'll show you is that you can use the same context to create additional parts. Let's go create a part on the side here. And this is going to be super fast. I'm just going to sketch something on the side of this, this side rail, right? And I'm going to disable imprinting for now. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle like this. And I'm going to project a couple of holes. We'll just project those 2 holes. This is just a temporary part. We're going to extrude this thing and, we'll make it 1 inch thick. Why not? Okay, so we got that big old block there, right? And it's a new part. So I'm going to come down here, rename it as, big block part. And so now we have 2 things in here. And if I click on go to assembly, it didn't do the auto insert like it did when we created the new context, the new part studio. So I'm going to do an insert current document. Here are the switch plates, and you can see big block is there. Okay. We'll grab this hole and we'll fasten it over here. Right. And we'll flip it so it sticks out. Okay. There we go. So there you go. So these are that part studio is just like any other part studio. I can insert as many of these things as I want. So in the future, we are going to do a lot more with doing in-context editing. I just wanted to give you some of the basics of it. It's a very powerful technique for doing things. Next steps is we are going to now move over to work a lot in part studios, and we're going to go into great detail on how part studios can work for you. If you get a chance, please see if you can catch up and go do all of the steps that I did to create that part in context. See you on the next video.